Most Bitcoiners are worried about their security, their privacy, and that's all fine and dandy, but there's a much bigger threat that can take 30 to 40% of all of your Bitcoin if you don't pay attention to it. And that threat is taxes. You can't avoid it. You can't even avoid it. You can't avoid it, when you're gone. You can't avoid it while you're here. Every time you go to the store, you get taxed. Whenever you sell a house, you get taxed. You sell an investment, you get taxed. You live in a tax bubble. So if you aren't prepared to be strategic about how you approach your Bitcoin taxes, what will happen is by the time it is time for your children to inherit your Bitcoin, if you don't prepare properly, they're going to get hit with even more taxes. And those taxes are going to amount to more than what you invested in. Those taxes are going to amount to more than what you spent on your home. And they're going to amount to more than what your children actually inherited. And wouldn't that be a tragedy? So we don't want to be those people. We've already seen what happens when people don't structure their situation properly and they get taxed out the wazoo. But we've also seen what happens when people do structure their taxes properly. We've seen billionaires come out with zero tax bills. So how can we leverage the same strategies that the billionaires are using to legally avoid taxes? Because tax avoidance is 100% legal. They've proved that in Supreme Court. So that's not an issue. Tax avoidance is 100% legal, which is why the president of the United States is on camera and he's confronted and they say, you don't pay taxes. And he's like, me not paying taxes, that means I'm smart. I'm not in jail. That means I've done something right. I've done something strategic. I've learned the tax code, or I surrounded myself around someone who knows the tax code. And we've leveraged that to our benefit, because what the difference between wealthy people and just the average person, they understand that the tax code is a book of incentives. So the IRS, the government, has thousands of pages in the tax code. And no, that is not thousands of pages telling you how to file taxes. It's actually thousands of pages telling you how to avoid taxes or how you can avoid taxes. Now, it's not saying avoid taxes by doing this A, B, C, and D. No, it's a book of incentives that encourages economic productivity. The tax code awards producers, investors. It does not award consumers, which is why as a W-2 employee, those people are getting taxed at the highest rate. They got the worst tax situation possible. They don't really have that much flexibility, which is why as a Bitcoin holder, the last thing you want to do is hold Bitcoin as an individual. So if you're holding Bitcoin as an individual, you are setting yourself up for failure, because although all of these different people have different strategies or whatnot, different industries or whatnot, there's one strategy that has ruled them all. One strategy that stands above all other tax strategies. And as a tax strategist, I'm telling you, once you learn this, there's not too many different situations that you need to get super creative with. Obviously there are, a handful of different strategies depending on your situation that can even improve it more. But the main strategy is buy, borrow, die. This is what all the people who beat the shirt sleeves curse and had wealth that lasted longer than 3 generations. This is what all of them did. They bought mainly businesses in real estate. They borrowed against those businesses in real estate, and then they died. And then those assets were passed along to their heirs. Now, the key to the buy, borrow, die strategy is having a proper structure, which is why I love trust. And I made a whole video on trust. You can find that on my channel. It might be one of the 2 videos before this. I don't know how, not Instagram, I don't know how YouTube structures the videos, but it's definitely on my page. And I give you a whole breakdown on how you need to address your trust if you plan to have digital assets like Bitcoin inside of it. But trust has so many different benefits. Obviously, it protects you from any legal BS, but if you structure it right and you have the right tax advisor or the right tax strategy, you can actually eliminate all taxes. So we're not talking about some strategy that is, new for Bitcoin, but understand that IRS, the government, looks at Bitcoin, it views Bitcoin as property. So if it's viewed as property from a tax standpoint, we know exactly how to treat it. We can look at real estate and what the real estate moguls and tycoons have done, and we can capitalize on their mistakes and their wins. Because I can tell you, I used to interview a lot of real estate folks when I first stopped going to college. I was highly considering being a real estate developer. And I was just always at different real estate meetups, just connecting with different people on Bigger Pockets and all this stuff. And I learned from Charlie Munger that you always want to minimize your mistakes as much as possible. Now, I haven't always done that, but it always stuck with me. So during that time, I would always ask the question, what was one of your biggest mistakes? And a lot of them actually says selling real estate, meaning that they should have never sold, because after they spent years and looked back, hindsight is always 2020. They said that, dang, man, this real estate appreciated so much. If I had only held, I would never have needed to sell anyway. Obviously certain types of debt prevented them from holding it long term. But for the ones who could have kept it and could have held, they regret selling, because the amount of appreciation that real estate brought, they could have maintained the property, they could have kept the property, and they could have extracted value, cash value from that property based on the appreciation. So for example, let's say someone had a $10 million building, a $5 million building. In 5 years, that building, was worth $10 million. Mind you, over that 5 years, they've still been paying down principal and interest. So let's call it $6 million in equity. They can now go and pull a percentage of equity out of that building. And the smart guys aren't doing what the Vanderbilts did, where they took their assets and they went and bought liabilities and things like that. No, the smart guys take that loan that they leveraged against that asset, that appreciating asset, and they went out and bought more cash flow. And before you know it, they have this flywheel that is just spitting out cash constantly. And guess what? Their structure allows them to avoid taxes forever, because they're never selling anything. They're only borrowing. And the tax code states that we are not taxed on loans. So today, it's March 2025. Bitcoin is 16 years old. We don't have an issue borrowing against Bitcoin anymore. So if you are a serious Bitcoin holder, and I advise all of my clients, hey, really consider borrowing against that, because if you sell, then you're going to have to buy back in at a higher price. You're not going to be able to capture that appreciation. You're not going to be as flexible with your loan LTV. But if you do, make some smart decisions now, you can borrow against that Bitcoin, go and mix it with a stable asset like a small business or real estate, and they both benefit each other very well. You'll borrow against the Bitcoin, so you never have to sell, you never have any taxes. And then if you're worried about the volatility or anything with Bitcoin, you stabilize it with something like an old, boring business or a nice, consistent piece of real estate, whether it's industrial real estate where you got 10, 20-year leases, or you got multifamily real estate where you have so many doors and you got a lot of flexibility as far as cash flow, right? So that stability stabilizes the volatility of the Bitcoin in your trust or your family portfolio. And also that appreciation from the Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has been appreciated on the average of 60% a year. If that appreciation can offset the slow growth of real estate. So those assets balance each other out very, very well. And that's more of a Bitcoin Jedi move, or I don't even know if I could just call it a Bitcoin Jedi move, because people have been borrowing against assets to buy real estate and businesses forever. But now we have a more liquid, a more fluid asset to borrow against. And I think people are going to start waking up soon. So you guys heard it here first. That's a really high level strategy. So just to kind of recap, the main thing that you want to remember about this strategy: buy, borrow, die. We want to buy assets that appreciate in value. And mind you, I'm a Bitcoin guy, so I think you should buy Bitcoin. That's a solid foundation, easy to borrow against, easy to maneuver. And next, we want to borrow against it. It's 2025. We can go and borrow from multiple different lending sources, multiple regulated institutional lenders. Granted, we may have to allocate that coin to an institutional custody provider to hold it as a third party between me and the lender, but that is protected under regulation to a certain extent, obviously. But we can borrow against our Bitcoin same day. You can go and get $20 million worth of Bitcoin today. If you got $20 million worth of Bitcoin, you can go and borrow 50% of it cash, same day, easy. Multiple people are willing to do that. In fact, we now have peer-to-peer lending operations where you can go online and people are willing to lend against your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin will be held in like a multi-sig wallet, managed by smart contracts and things like that. And you'll have a 12-month term, 14%. Take that 14% 12-month term pay it back at the end of the 12 month. And at that time, you should have already found some type of cash flowing asset that you're going to use to make use of those funds so that you're not just sitting on the sideline hodling forever, and now you're building a foundation of framework that the IRS absolutely loves because you are producing in society instead of being a straight up consumer. The government does not like consumerism. They don't like consumerism because it doesn't help push the country forward. That's why, Trump is making all of these different tax cuts and giving these tax benefits to manufacturing companies, shipping companies, right? Because he wants you to produce. So that's in line with the government for as long as government has been, a thing. And that's the easiest tax strategy that you guys are ever going to get. Obviously, that does not apply if you are a trader or something like that. But we do have some really interesting strategies for traders or for people who have a significant amount of income and it's not being converted into Bitcoin. We can also use, that's a totally different strategy. I won't go into that. But just know if you guys have a lot of income from a business and you want to leverage a trust to essentially defer those taxes for multiple years in a row, we can do that for you. So again, if you guys have someone who loves Bitcoin the same way that you and I love Bitcoin and are on a sovereignty journey, share this video with someone so that they don't get hit with the 30 or 40% tax bill by the IRS and so that they do it smart, strategic. And I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace.